I'm concerned about what happens in Xinjiang province, and I think there are issues about proper compensation of workers, and I don't like the idea of any kind of forced labor. And so I'm a critic of China.
For people like Helena and all the other distinguished people, don't mess with China. Therefore, the spillover of terrorism, radicalization, and extremism from Afghanistan, from those people who want to launch jihad against America, against NATO, against British soldiers, for example, into Xinjiang is real. It's not pretended, it's not fabricated. If you say, no, China is immune from all these radicalization from Afghanistan into Xinjiang, then you do not know what you are talking about. All this is real. Don't pretend that you do not know. And as a result
I do know.
Over. Allow me to finish. I listened to you very carefully just now without any interruption. If you have criticism about China, be very straightforward. But criticism should be for the purpose of trying your best to help China to improve our situation, rather than condemning China. Allow me to mention one thing. If China provided weapons to Russia, the war would have been over already. If you want to use all these stereotypes and labels, which completely are not applicable to China, then my advice is, Helena, maybe next time when I'm in London, we can have a cup of tea to help you to really being reoriented to the realities in China.
I'm afraid I've been sanctioned by the Chinese. The Chinese government...
Why? Then you need to ask why. Why should China sanction you?
Victor Gao is a Chinese lawyer and academic. He's vice president of the Beijing-based Center for China and Globalization, and he's also a professor at Soochow University. Baroness Helena Kennedy is a Labour peer and an eminent human rights lawyer, and she's also co-chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, known as IPAC. Thank you for joining us. Victor, we've had a lot of people talking to us over the last few days warning that trade war can lead to real war. Do you think that's true?
Of course. If you look back to the 1920s and 1930s, trade war and tariff war, etc., combined together may eventually push the situation in the direction of war or even global war. So I think we all need to do the right thing. And the right thing for today is to protect free trade. And don't allow any country, no matter how big it is, how powerful it is, to trample upon the rules of free trade and hold a gun at the head of mankind. That's not going to work, because it may lead the whole world into a war or a global war. Now, for other countries, you may or may not have that courage or wisdom or vision to do what China is doing, but at least in your heart, you need to tell yourself which country is doing the right thing and which country is doing the wrong thing. China's position is also very clear. If you want to launch a war, if you want to impose a war on China, whether it is tariff war or trade war or scientific war or chips war or Cold War, proxy war or total war, China is always prepared to fight to the end, to defend itself, and in the case of the trade war and the tariff war, to defend free trade.
Well, let me immediately say that I have a great sympathy with what China is experiencing just now, in terms of the extraordinary high level of tariffs that are being applied by the United States. I think that is so much in defiance of the sort of World Trade Organization's way of doing business and so on. And I really do not think that economically it makes any sense to the United States or to the world. So let me make that clear from the start. I have had my own problems in relation to China, because I think that here is this incredible power, and I think that it doesn't look after its own workers often well. I'm concerned about what happens in Xinjiang province, and I think there are issues about proper compensation of workers, and I don't like the idea of any kind of forced labor. And it surprises me that a nation like China, which is so concerned with doing justice by its many rather than its few, is doing that to any set of workers. So I have concerns about what happens in factories around China, and I have made that very clear. And so I'm a critic of China with regard to how it deals with minorities and how it deals with issues of rights and how it deals with the rule of law. But let's go back to the business of trade. I've always felt that we should keep doors open. I'm not a hawk when it comes to relationships with China. I think that Britain should be having discussions about trade. But I think that we've got to be very clear. And Victor, I suspect that you're going to disagree with me. But there's a difference. But I don't know about whether there's a difference anymore in the United States, but there's a difference in Britain with regard to the commercial world and the state. And the state does not have access into the private matters concerning a company. But you know that your governing body, the Communist Party of China,
will really do better homework to realize that forced labor is not being practiced at all by any stretch of the imagination. For people like Helena and all the other distinguished people, what we don't like is false accusation, is accusation without doing the homework, is confounding black and white, for example, and try to accuse China as the culprit, whereas the realities on the ground are completely different. So I think if Helena is really very constructively minded, and the goal is to help China to improve, Helena, you will be my heroine. China welcomes positive, constructive criticism, but absolutely will fight against any false accusation and ungrounded condemnation.
Victor, you know that I'm a lawyer, but I'm a lawyer who's very much engaged with human rights issues, and I'm afraid I don't have very much truck with the idea that there are no human rights abuses being conducted against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang province, because I've seen too much of the evidence and I've heard too often from people who have been at the receiving end of persecution and have had to flee that persecution. Are they dealing with terrorism? Do you have collective punishments? Do you punish all of the people there in the ways that I think they are being punished? I'm happy to have those conversations with leading figures in China, but those things do alarm the West. Certainly the European West. I don't know whether they're causing great concern to either Russia or to the United States at the moment. But people in those countries also care about these issues. And so it seems to me that there's so many things that China could do. It could very easily say, we were trying to deal with, we felt, with terrorism, and it may be that we came down too heavily, and we're going to seek to address all of that, and we would like assistance in doing so. If China, for example, in relation to the Russia-Ukraine war, and which was started undoubtedly by Russia, if China took a position alongside Europe in supporting an end to that war that did justice for the Ukrainian people, then I think that that you would be creating a very different kind of perception of the journey that China is on in trying to address some of these issues.
Allow me to respond. I listened to you very carefully, Helena. You know, China is a nation with 56 different nationalities. Uyghur is one of the 56 different nationalities. So, to start with, you need to ask a question. Why, first of all the other 55 nationalities are very happy and very quiet, very law-abiding, and prospering together with the transformation in China, and why the Uyghur nationality has some problem? Now, then you also need to ask, what is the real problem involving some of the people in the Uyghur nationality? The reason is very simple. Xinjiang borders with Afghanistan. Just imagine if London borders with Afghanistan, then you will know immediately your risk profile will be completely different. And the 20-year war in Afghanistan, launched by the United States and participated by NATO, is a real thing. Afghanistan is still suffering from the aftermath of the 20-year-old war. And in Xinjiang, do you know, among the Uyghurs, there are people who call for jihad. Jihad against whom? Against China? No. Against the Chinese Communist Party? No. Against the Chinese people? No. Against the people like the Han nationality like me? No. They are calling for jihad against American troops occupying Afghanistan. They are calling for jihad against the NATO soldiers fighting in Afghanistan, including British soldiers. They were on the battleground. They killed the NATO soldiers, American soldiers. Some of them were arrested. Some of them were put into prison in Guantanamo Bay. All this is real. Don't pretend that you do not know. And as a result of that,
I do know.
Over. Allow me to finish. I listened to you very carefully just now without any interruption. Therefore, the spillover of terrorism, radicalization, and extremism from Afghanistan, from those people who want to launch jihad against America, against NATO, against British soldiers, for example, into Xinjiang, is real. It's not pretended. It's not fabricated. If you say, no, China is immune from all these radicalization from Afghanistan into Xinjiang, then you do not know what you are talking about. So that's number one. Now, the second thing is very interesting. While terrorism, extremism, radicalization are what we consider evil forces, do you know what their real ultimate goal is? Their ultimate goal is to split Xinjiang into a separate independent country. They want to take away Xinjiang from China. And do you think the 1.4 billion people in China will ever tolerate such a prospect? Someone using whatever means they have at disposal, sometimes being fanned by some Western countries behind them, try to take away Xinjiang, 1/6 of the landmass of China. Now, when you talk about human rights problems, tell me whether you see any country in the world which has a perfect record of human rights. Every country has some problems, different in nature, different in degree, etc. When you say in China you have human rights problems, I agree with you. I want to work with you to see whether these human rights problems can be addressed. But when you say, wow, there are atrocities, there are crimes against humanity, there are other things, for example, you have mass detention of Uyghur people. No, Helena, you do not know what you are talking about. I actually met with the head of the World Uyghur Congress. And I met with the former chairman of the United States Congressional International Religion Committee, for example. Both of them were Uyghurs. We chatted. We can talk. We can exchange views. They know my view is completely different from them. They know they are getting the support. And both of them, actually, very interestingly, are U.S. citizens. They carry U.S. passports. But their goal is to really create a situation where ultimately, according to their version of the truth, that the Uyghurs will have their own homeland. Uyghurs will have their own republic, or Uyghurs will have their caliphate. Now, from Chinese perspective, this mission will never be possible. We will never allow that to be accomplished. So when you say, I support
what about the point about Ukraine?
Ukraine is very simple. From day one, China has been calling for ceasefire, immediate ceasefire. China called Russia to ceasefire, China called on Ukraine to do the ceasefire. Now, people accuse China of siding with Russia and providing support to Russia. Allow me to mention one thing. If China provided weapons to Russia, the war would have been over already. Because if you know that China is the biggest producer of all these weapons of all kinds, etc., if China provides all these things to Russia, it will be one-sided.
My concerns are first of all about human rights, and I don't accept Victor's picture, which is that why the Uyghur, and I think, I mean, it's a bit like people would say why the Irish, as if somehow there are some people who are more inclined towards terrorism. It's just not true. The problem in Xinjiang province is that yes, I'm sure that there are jihadists, and I'm sure that there are people who want to live in a caliphate and are extremists and have been affected by the sort of Talibanization of creating a sort of political Islam. But those people are few. And I think the majority of people are absolutely wanting to live a peaceful life in Xinjiang province. They're not unhappy about being part of China if China respects them and respects their rights. And that's been my experience in my meeting with many of the Uyghur people. And so I don't accept this. The business is that terrorism and when the United States created this notion of a war on terrorism after 9/11, unfortunately, it gave excuses to other countries to go after the small numbers of people who might have those sort of jihadist views, to actually exact a much greater, if you like, punishment on the whole community in order to prevent the rise of it. I think that there are people who want, inside China, who want to be respected and to live as Muslims, to follow their religion and not to feel that they have to become like the Han. It's that sort of homogenization which seems to be part of President Xi's plan for China. Now, when Victor says, and he's a very smart man, so he knows that I will say this to him, when he says that the people, all the other provinces and all the other many peoples of minorities who are not Han Chinese, they all accept all of this and that they're happy. They're not. Many of them just get on with life quietly, knowing that because of the authoritarian nature of the regime, they couldn't possibly speak out, and they couldn't possibly insist on practicing their own religion or their own culture and so forth. And so it's about the fear. To go back to the business.
Could you also just explain, Helena, I mean, this question of sort of what the perceived threat from China is, as China becomes economically and militarily very strong, there is this sense of sort of, well, they are not the entirely innocent, just simply trading nation, and that they do pose a threat. So what is that perceived threat?
Well, first of all, we know that because of the huge numbers of people that there are inside the continent or the nation of China, they can very easily, they have a workforce that will work very cheaply, and that they can therefore undercut what's happening in other parts of the world. So that there's that whole competition, it's not an equality of arms. They can produce things much more cheaply, and therefore it has created for the United States, and certainly for Western countries and for Britain, ways in which products can be produced in a way that could never be produced for the cost that if they were made here. So that let's face that reality. The other thing is that the Chinese people are incredibly clever and very smart. They're very good at sort of seeing what other people are doing, adapting it and adopting it, and some would say stealing the intellectual property of others who've invented things. And so, but that has gone on, not just with China, but China's very good at it. The other thing is that China, in its if you like, its Belt and Roads policies, have gone into Africa full of poor places, places that need infrastructure and so on. And it has been mopping up the friendship of nations. That helps them both at the United Nations to flatten criticism, but it also helps them in relation to securing some of the rare earth minerals that are very important in the creation of technology. Victor, can I just tell you? I'm just going to tell you that I take my hat off to the sheer ingenuity of the Chinese people. That the cleverness and the inventiveness is to be greatly admired. But I do want you to know that I can't come and visit you in Beijing as you're inviting me to do, and you're saying I'd be very welcome. You might put the welcome mat out for me, but I'm afraid I've been sanctioned by the Chinese. The Chinese government.
Why? Then you need to ask you why. Why should China sanction you?
Why? I know perfectly well why they sanctioned me. They sanctioned me because, as a parliamentarian, along with Lord Alton in the House of Lords, he and I were both highly critical of what was happening to the Uyghur people in Xinjiang province, and I was also very critical of what was happening to the rule of law in Hong Kong. And but 5 members of the House of Commons were also sanctioned, and it was about freedom of speech, you see. And I think freedom of speech isn't operative in China. And so when people in Britain, even parliamentarians who are protected with what they say in Parliament, when we were talking about what was going on there, that made us alien to the regime in China, and I'm afraid I've been sanctioned. So I can't visit my friends in China. I can't visit and see the wonderful art. I can't go and see the beauties of China because I'm banned from China.
But are you shocked that Helena is banned?
I hope eventually sanctions against you will be removed and you will be welcome to China. But there is a precondition, I would say, that is, really deal with China as it is, without blowing things out of proportion, and deal with China as it is, deal with the Chinese people as it is, deal with a person like Victor Gao as I am.
We must wrap it up, I'm afraid. But thank you very much indeed, both of you. Thank you, Baroness
Thank you,
Kennedy, Victor Gao. Thank you both.